This video will be for the wrapped binding. So we've already got our sample for the shoulder stays stitched. So we're gonna go ahead and do a second technique on this same piece. So we've already cut front and back, unfold, and stitched our shoulders and our side seams. Okay, the second pattern piece you're gonna need for this one is the wrapped binding trim. And you're gonna cut one of those. I'm just gonna ask you to do the wrapped binding on one side, and we'll just leave the other side unfinished for this sample. Okay, so cut one of those. I've got that out of the same fabric. So both of these are a moderate stretch fabric. Okay, and the first thing we're gonna need to do is put this right sides together and finish that end so that our binding is in a circle. Okay, so I've got my binding folded in half down the short side, excuse me, and I'm just going to stitch that, and it's right sides together, serge that so that we're creating a circle of the binding. And back to our ironing board again. Okay, now we're going to open up our binding and fold it in half, wrong sides together. So I'm gonna put that wrong sides together and fold the full circle in half and press that edge so we have a crease. Those raw edges even. There we go. Now I'm just gonna press my folded edge so I have a nice crease on there. Okay, now I'm ready to start pinning it to my garment. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my garment. I'm looking at the wrong side of my fabric, so my garment's inside out. Make sure these seams get put towards the back of your garment. So the back for mine goes this way. And I'm gonna put the seam of my binding right there on the side seam as well, so it's a little bit hidden. And start pinning. So it goes in a circle that way. There we go. And this should just lay flat and be the same measurement as your armhole. So make sure you're not stretching your fabric out as you go. Double check that that seam is towards the back. Here we go. Okay, now we're ready to go stitch this on. Okay, over at my domestic machine, I've got my walking foot on so I don't stretch out my fabric as I go. And I'm going to use my stretch stitch, and we'll stitch this on at 3/8 of an inch. And I'm just using my hand in the back to help guide it through the machine. I'm not really pulling it, I'm just keeping it flat as I go. Double check, make sure your binding, your raw edges are all staying even as you go. We're going to head back over to our ironing board. Okay, so we just stitched that onto the wrong side of our garment. Now we're going to flip it out and press it, but these seam allowances are going to stay sticking out. So I'm going to keep those sticking out, flip this out away from my garment, and we're going to press that edge. I'm going to grab my pressing roll. If you have one of these, excuse me, bumped. That may just make your life a little bit easier, but if not, you can still just do it on your basic ironing board. Okay, so flip that out and press this seam. Just double check that your seam allowances are sticking out the whole time. And work your way around the armhole. Okay, so I got my full armhole pressed, and my seam allowances are sticking out towards my bias, or towards my wrapped binding strip. And now I'm going to flip my garment right side out. And we're going to fold this binding right where that seam allowance is of that 3/8 inch. Fold it in or towards the right side of your fabric. Okay, and it should just cover up that stitch line. And then we'll press that as well. So I like to get myself started with a few pins first, and then I can come press. If you have pins where the head of your pin does not melt, then you can press on top of it. And just work your way around the arm doing that as well. Okay, so back over at our sewing machine, I've got that pinned. And now I'm going to put this under my walking foot. And we're just going to edge stitch that folded edge that hasn't been secured down yet. And this finished strip should be a 1/2 inch wide. So I'm lining it up with that 1/2 inch marking, and I'm going to stitch there. When you get to your seam where the seam of the binding is, you will have quite a bit of bulk to work over. So just use both your hands to help it under the foot. And you can go a little bit more slowly in that spot so it can get over that hump. I'm pulling that out. We now have a finished wrapped binding. Okay, last step would just be to go give it another press before you turn it in and trim your threads.